Don't you dare approach him again. Jungkook's sharp voice hurt Jimin more deeply than words can express. Jimin stood transfixed in front of Jungkook, who seemed to be a stranger, who was no longer his best friend. There was only a deafening silence between them, although around them, the world was constantly spinning. There was no sound, except for Jimin's heart beating faster. He has fought tooth and nail, risking everything to protect Jungkook, even if it means putting himself in danger. But now, what does he get? Jungkook's coldness was like ice separating the two, as if no bond had ever existed between them. What do you think, Jimin? What did you expect? Jungkook's voice was louder, with eyes full of hatred and disappointment. Jimin felt a pang in his chest, like something was tearing at his heart. His whole effort, his sacrifice, was wasted in an instant. In the past, they were close friends, sharing laughter and tears. But it all ended just like that, and now all that remains is unspoken bitterness. Jimin gulped, trying to stay calm. Cookook, I just want the best for you. Why don't you understand? Jungkook shook his head, his expression frozen, as if there was no more room for understanding. Don't. You meddle too much in my affairs. You don't know what's going on. You don't know anything. Jimin felt a great wall forming between them, and he stood before Jungkook, not knowing what else to do. He knew he had gone too far, doing something Jungkook could not accept. But it's not about him. It's about protecting the people he cares about, despite having to deal with unexpected consequences. If I had to sacrifice myself for you, I would. Cookook, Jimin said, his voice trembling. However, Jungkook looked at her expressionlessly. Stop talking that shit. Jungkook turned around, walked away from Jimin without giving him a chance to retaliate. His departure left a deeper wound than Jimin thought he could feel. Jimin was silent, his body stiff. His mind was raging, but no answer could calm the storm within him. Why is Jungkook behaving like this? Why did he suddenly reject everything Jimin had done for him? The darkness of the night was getting tense, and the cold wind seemed to grease his skin wet with sweat. Jimin could only stare at Jungkook's increasingly distant back, and felt the loneliness that was so real hit him. Out there, the world keeps turning. But for Jimin, at that moment, everything seemed frozen. A friendship that has been built with a lot of struggle is now threatened to be destroyed in just a moment. Jungkook's coldness, a friend who used to always be by Jimin's side, was a heavy blow. Jimin must face the fact that he may have lost everything. However, behind all this, there is a darker secret that has not yet been revealed. Jimin knows one thing for sure. He will not stop fighting for Jungkook, even though his heart and soul are being tested. Jimin woke up in the middle of the night. His eyes still closed tightly. However, he could not sleep. The memories of Jungkook's heart-piercing words kept swirling in his head. Over the years, he fought tirelessly, sacrificing many things for his best friend. And now, all that sacrifice feels futile. He decides to go look for Jungkook, wanting to talk and repair the relationship that began to crack. With a heavy heart, Jimin stepped out of his apartment, penetrating the quiet night air. On a dark street, he recalls the first time they met, when they shared laughter and dreams. However, something bigger is threatening their relationship. Jimin does not know that behind Jungkook's coldness, there is a much bigger problem that involves the two of them. There are third parties who work in the shadows, orchestrating their steps without them knowing it. Jimin doesn't know if Jungkook is aware of this or not, but one thing is certain. The two of them won't be able to get out of this problem without sacrificing something bigger than just personal feelings. With each step he takes, Jimin feels more and more caught up in a bigger game than he ever imagined. Jungkook's coldness wasn't just a rejection, it was a harbinger of something darker and more dangerous. Jimin knows that in order to protect his best friend, he must dig deeper, even if it means facing a harsher reality than he ever imagined. What will happen to both of them? Will Jimin manage to reveal the hidden secret, or will he lose Jungkook suddenly? Jimin's phone vibrated. A message from Jungkook. You don't know what's going on, Jimin. Don't interfere anymore. Jimin clutched his phone with trembling hands. The message was from Jungkook, who seemed to wrap her in a fog of confusion and fear that enveloped her. You don't know what's going on, Jimin. Don't interfere anymore. Jimin could feel his breath stopping. Jungkook's coldness was like a sledgehammer that shattered his hopes. However, there was something in that message that Jimin couldn't just turn away from. Why is Jungkook talking like this? What the hell is going on with him? Jimin, no, this is not just an ordinary quarrel. It's more than that. It's about something bigger, something he can't ignore. So with a stronger determination, he decided to meet with Jungkook, no matter what. Jimin walked quickly, stepping through the dark hallways leading to Jungkook's apartment. Each step was heavier than before. At every corner of the street, there was a shadow lurking, as if everything around him was urging him to retreat. But he can't back down now. Not after everything he has sacrificed for Jungkook. When Jimin reached the door of Jungkook's apartment, his heart skipped a beat. He knocked on the door, hoping to see his best friend's face, to be able to hear the explanation directly from Jungkook's mouth. However, there was no answer. The door is locked tightly. Suddenly, Jimin's phone rang. An incoming message. Don't come here. I don't want to see you again. Jimin's hand stopped in the air, as if struck by such a cold and sharp reality. However, the pain he felt was now replaced by constancy. He knew that something big was going on, and he wasn't going to just leave Jungkook. Jimin decided not to give up. He goes to places Jungkook used to go, hoping to find clues. After several hours of searching, he finally found her in a small cafe that no one else visited. Jungkook sat in the corner, looking more gloomy than ever. His eyes looked blankly out the window, like he didn't want anyone to bother him. Jimin approached, his heart pounding. "Cook," he called softly, hoping to get Jungkook's attention. Jungkook turned his head slowly, and Jimin could barely contain his sobs. Jungkook's face was so broken, like someone struggling with his own demo. "Cook, why are you acting like this? There's something you're hiding, right?" Jungkook lowered his head, trying to avoid Jimin's gaze. "Jimin, this is not the time to talk. You don't understand what I'm dealing with." However, Jimin could not remain silent. "Don't think I'll back down just because of that cold attitude of yours. We've been through so much together, Cook. I know there's something bigger behind this. I want to help. Please give me a chance." Jungkook fell silent, seemingly confused between revealing everything or hermetically sealing the secret that bound him. Finally, he lifted his head and looked at Jimin with anxious eyes. "You know everything, Jim. I'm gonna make your life worse than you ever imagined." Suddenly, the atmosphere around them changed. As something lurked, the atmosphere in the cafe was getting tense. Jimin felt something was wrong. But before he could ask any further, the door of the cafe opened loudly, and several men dressed in black entered. Their faces were flat, their eyes observing every corner of the room. Jungkook stood up, apparently worried. "Jimin, go. It's none of your business anymore. Don't get yourself hurt." Jimin was stunned. "Cook, who are they?" But Jungkook did not answer, only signaled for Jimin to leave immediately. As Jimin looked at him in confusion, one of the men stepped towards them, eyes full of threat. "Jungkook, your time is up." The man's voice was deep and intimidating. "We've waited too long." Jimin felt his body freeze, and before he could act, the man was already in front of them. Jungkook looked at her with a look full of regret. "Jimin, leave now. I can't protect you anymore." In the next second, the man held Jimin's arm with such a strong force. "It's time to learn, Jim. Nothing can stop us now." Time seemed to slow down as the sound of gunfire echoed inside the cafe. Jimin felt the air around him freeze, his eyes closed for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The sound of footsteps running, the sound of broken glass, all mixed with the darkness that suddenly covered the space. The atmosphere that had been calm now turned into full of tension and fear. The hand of the man holding Jimin's arm was getting tighter. However, what was surprising was Jungkook's reaction. With eyes blazing full of anger, Jungkook leapt forward, holding back the man holding Jimin. "Don't touch him," he exclaimed in a loud voice, but his body trembled, as if afraid of something bigger than himself. Jimin could hardly believe what was happening. Jungkook, the friend he had always trusted, now looked very different. His gaze was full of anxiety, but also filled with a refusal to involve others in the big problems he was facing. Then, the man who had previously held Jimin suddenly released his grip and stepped back. "Jungkook, don't try to fight us." The man's voice was like a snake's hiss, sharp and cold. "You know the consequences. All this will be over if you turn yourself in." Jimin shuddered. "What do they mean, Cook? What exactly happened?" His voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. However, Jungkook just looked at her blankly, like he was keeping a big secret that he couldn't reveal. "Jimin." Jungkook's voice was quiet, yet full of emphasis. "You have to go? Now." Jimin couldn't move. Everything happened so fast. It was like a nightmare that he didn't want to believe. Cook, I won't just leave you. He held Jungkook's hand, trying to give him strength, even though his heart was broken to see the drastic change that had happened to his best friend. But that's when the man in front of them pulled out a weapon. If you don't cooperate, we will make this worse, he said in a voice that showed no sign of humanity. With the shots just shaking things up, the atmosphere in the cafe was even more tense. Everyone who had been sitting quietly now took refuge, looking for a place to hide. Jimin and Jungkook just stand in the middle of that tension, trapped in a situation that's getting harder and harder to control. Jimin finds himself caught between two worlds he doesn't understand. On the one hand, he wants to protect Jungkook, but on the other hand, he knows that there are forces far greater than himself that are threatening them both. He could feel a chill begin to creep over his skin, and fear began to seep into his body. Jimin, you have to go. Jungkook finally raised his hand, shaking Jimin's arm. I don't want to involve you in all this. They'll hurt you if they know we're close. Jimin could see the panic in Jungkook's eyes. Cook, what really happened? What do they want from you? But Jungkook was silent, his face lifted slightly upwards, as if thinking aloud. I have a debt I must pay, he replied in a low voice, as if trying to avoid further questions. And if you stay here, they will ruin your life too. Jimin was silent for a moment, his mind spinning. He knew that there was something much bigger than he thought. But what? Why is Jungkook so scared? What happened to his best friend? Just then, the man holding the weapon approached again, this time faster and more resolute. I told you, you have no choice, Jungkook. Give yourself up, or everything will end badly. Jimin looked at Jungkook, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. Cook, what should I do? He asked, a voice almost desperate. I can't leave you, but I don't know what to do either. Jungkook finally took a deep breath, as if deciding on something very big inside himself. Jimin, I want you to live. Don't let yourself get caught up in all this. He looked at Jimin with a look of regret. I can't explain everything right now, but I promise I'll explain everything after this is over. Jimin's hands trembled as he held Jungkook's arm. I can't stay still, Cook. You're not just my best friend, you're my family. I'll fight for you. However, at that moment, the gunman moved forward, and within seconds, the sound of a second shot was heard. Everyone fell silent, and the world seemed to stop for a moment. Jimin felt his blood freeze. Jungkook fell to the floor, his body drooping limply. Cook, Jimin shouted, falling to his side, holding his friend's body that began to droop. All around them began to rush. The situation was getting chaotic. Jimin could only see Jungkook slowly losing consciousness. Terrible voices were heard around them. Yet Jimin could only hold Jungkook's hand, trying to hold on, despite his broken heart. With blood beginning to pool on the floor, Jimin felt the world begin to collapse. Cook, don't leave me, she whispered in a voice full of tears. However, as he tried to reach for his phone for help, a message appeared on the screen. Don't trust anyone. Take care of yourself. But who sent the message? And what does that mean? The siren sounded closer, but Jimin didn't seem to hear it. His eyes focused on Jungkook, who was weakly drooping in his hands. Blood began to pool on the floor, forming a terrible red trail. Jimin could not move, feeling paralyzed on the spot. Cold sweat soaked his forehead, and his breath was choked. Everything seemed to have stopped, and only the sound of his heartbeat could he hear. Cook, please, wake up. Jimin's voice was barely audible. His hands trembled as he tried to lift Jungkook's head. However, his best friend's body felt so heavy, as if he was carrying a burden that he could not bear alone. Jungkook's face looked pale, his lips dry, and his eyes half closed. Jimin looked at her anxiously, trying to look for signs of life. Jungkook, he cried again, in a louder voice. However, there was no response. At a glance, Jimin saw the figure of the gunman who triggered this chaos, standing a few meters away from them. Under the dim light, the man looked unhurried. In fact, there was a faint smile on his face, as if enjoying the suffering that was happening before them. Is that what you call friendship? The man's voice was cold, almost grinning. You don't know what's going on, Jimin. You're too naive to understand. Jimin gritted his teeth. What do you mean? Why would you do that to him? What do you really want from him? The urge came out so deep, almost out of control. The man stepped closer, his steps heavy and sure. You will never understand. He owes us, and we'll make sure he pays our way. The man's voice was like a slicing knife, sharp and merciless. Don't blame us. It's all Jungkook's choice. Jimin felt his heart squeezed. Choice? Jimin asked in an almost incredulous tone. Jungkook never chose this. You have no choice, Jim. No one can fight what has happened, the man replied, his face turning more serious. And you shouldn't interfere. Jimin bit his lower lip, feeling the confusion build up. I'm not going to leave Cookook. I won't let him face this alone, she insisted, with teary eyes. However, the man only laughed softly. You think so, but in reality, it's too late. It's all gone too far. Jungkook promised us. Nothing can reverse that. Jimin stared at Jungkook's increasingly fragile body, feeling like the world was collapsing around him. Every passing second gets heavier, and she knows she has to do something to save her best friend, but she doesn't know what. No clue, no way out. All he knew was one thing. He couldn't just let Jungkook be destroyed. Her tears began to flow without being able to stop. Jungkook, wake up. I beg you. You can't just leave me, she whispered, trying to wake up her best friend's body. But what made him even more desperate was the strange calmness of Jungkook's motionless body. The sound of footsteps approached, and without waiting, the gunman raised his gun again, pointing the tip of the barrel at Jimin. You talk too much, Jimin, he said, his voice full of anger hidden behind calm. However, before the man could pull the trigger, the sound of the cafe door opening loudly echoed. The police, who finally arrived, ran into the room. The increasingly chaotic situation turned into a battlefield. Some members of the police immediately confronted the gunman, pointing their weapons, while others ran towards Jimin and Jungkook. Jimin felt as if the world was spinning so fast. He saw some police officers trying to stabilize Jungkook, providing first aid, while others detained the gunman. However, everything felt like a nightmare that didn't end as the medics carried Jungkook out of the cafe. Jimin could only stand still. His body felt weak. His brain was full of confusion. What really happened to his best friend? Why did Jungkook get caught up in something like this? And most importantly, who was behind all this? Jimin gasped, running after the ambulance carrying Jungkook. The bustling and noisy streets of the city seemed to become faint to his ears, as if this world was no longer real. He can only focus on one goal, saving Jungkook. However, each step felt heavier. Every beat of his heart seemed to remind him of the vacillation that permeated his heart. Could he really save his best friend who was trapped in a world full of threats? I can't fail, Jimin muttered, biting his lips hard. I'm not going to let what happened to Cookook end everything. But the longer, the more signs that indicate that he may have entered the wrong path. The path is full of secrets that are darker than he imagined. In the car, Jimin felt the tension build up. It felt like something terrible was approaching, and he knew it wasn't just about Jungkook. There's something bigger. When the ambulance finally stopped at the hospital, Jimin ran outside, not caring about the rain that had begun to fall. The medics immediately took Jungkook to the emergency room, and Jimin stood outside, staring at the tightly closed door with a sense of uncertainty. What happened, Cookook? He whispered, trying to digest everything he had just witnessed. Why did all this have to happen? At that moment, his cell phone rang again. Without hesitation, Jimin took the phone, feeling uneasy. Jimin, do you know? The voice on the other end of the phone made Jimin feel even more chaotic. It was a voice he knew, but never expected to hear under these circumstances. It's bigger than you think. Bigger than you can bear. Jimin felt his chest tightness. Who is this? What the hell is going on? Why is Jungkook? Why is he involved in all this? The voice on the other end of the phone was silent for a moment, as if thinking aloud before answering. Jungkook has been caught up in a conflict that existed long before he knew you. There is a greater power that controls all this. And you, Jimin, you're only going to get more entangled if you keep trying to help him. Jimin could barely breathe. What do you mean? What really happened to Cookook? He asked, his voice trembling. He's my best friend. I'm not going to just let it go. If you really care, you need to get out of here, Jimin. Stay out of it. This is not a world you can understand. The voice fell silent again before adding, Jungkook has made up his mind, and that decision will destroy you both. The phone was cut off, and Jimin could only stare at his phone screen in confusion. Who's that guy? And what exactly happened? All this time, he always saw Jungkook as a friend who never got involved in things like this. But now everything has changed. What is hidden behind the ever-cheerful eyes of his best friend? In the waiting room of the hospital, Jimin sat uneasily, unable to calm his mind. He knew something was terribly wrong, and the mysterious voice only made his feelings worse. Jungkook, his best friend, could not have been involved in this kind of crime. But if that's true, then what can he do? On the other side, a door opened and a doctor came out, facing Jimin. You're Jimin, right? He asked with a serious face. Jimin stood up quickly, hoping to hear good news. How is Jungkook? He asked in a hopeful tone. The doctor sighed and glanced down. The situation is quite serious. The wounds were deep, but we managed to stop the bleeding. He is still in intensive care now. We will monitor his condition. But there is something you must know, he said in a lower voice. Jungkook wasn't just hurt because of last night. There were other signs that we found, signs that he had been involved in something worse than we thought. Jimin felt as if the world stopped spinning. What does that mean? What happened to Cookook? The doctor seemed to hesitate for a moment, then took a deep breath. We found traces of illegal drugs in his blood. Not only that, there were signs that he had been involved in activities involving dangerous people. Jimin was surprised. That's impossible. Cookook is not like that. There must be a mistake. There must be a mistake, he cried, trying to hold back the tears that began to wane. The doctor looked at him sympathetically. I'm just telling you what we found, Jimin. I know it's hard, but you should know that what happened to Jungkook is probably much more complex than you can imagine. Jimin felt his body limp. There was nothing he could do but sit back and look out the window, trying to digest it all. How could the friend he had always known, who was always passionate, kind, and cheerful, be involved in such a dark world? Jimin stood up from his seat and stepped outside, looking for some fresh air. Every question in his head weighed more and more on his heart. If what the doctor says is true, then everything he knows about Jungkook is a lie. But on the other hand, there was something he could not let go of, the feeling that his best friend could not simply be mired in such a cruel world. At the same time, his cell phone rang again. This time, he was no longer surprised. Without looking at who was calling, he answered her in despair. Jimin. The voice sounded more resolute and cold than before. You have to stop trying to find out more. If you keep going, not only your life is at risk, but the lives of those you care about. What do you mean? Jimin almost screamed. Who are you? And why do you keep warning me? But the voice on the other end of the phone only answered with one haunting sentence. You'll find out soon enough, Jim. And when that time comes, no one will be able to save you too. The morning was heavier than usual. Jimin looked in the mirror, trying to find the courage in his eyes that began to fade. Every passing second felt like a burden, every breath felt shorter. He hadn't slept last night. Too many things ringing in his head. The sound of a phone call, an unspoken threat, and the words of a doctor who seemed to embrace him in the grip of uncertainty. This is bigger than you thought. The voice echoed back in his mind, haunting every corner of his heart. That he closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. But the shadow of Jungkook, lying weak in the hospital, clouded Jimin's mind. Her best friend, whom she should have relied on, is now entangled in a mystery far more complicated than she could have imagined. How could a world so bright and full of laughter change so quickly? Jimin, you can't do it alone, whispered a voice within him. He looked out the window, as if trying to find answers among the tall buildings and the gray sky. But all he found was a deepening confusion. Can no longer wait without certainty. Jimin decided to go to a place that might be able to provide answers. He knew very well that this was not a safe journey. He did not even know if he could return alive after this. But if he doesn't, will he be able to forgive himself? After several hours of travel, Jimin arrived at the place he had been promised, an old warehouse on the outskirts of a deserted town. Cold, dark, and lonely. Only the sound of the wind and the hissing of Jimin's footsteps could be heard. The warehouse looked uninhabited, yet there was something strange behind its existence. Every second felt like waiting for something big to happen. Jimin took a deep breath and knocked on the barn door 3 times, a signal that had been agreed upon in advance. Before long, the door opened slowly, revealing a large man with a flat face. "You came." The man's voice was cold, expressionless. "I didn't think you would dare. I should know," Jimin replied with a determination that began to strengthen, although in his heart was still seething with fear. "What happened to Jungkook?" The man looked at him for a long time, as if analyzing every word that came out of Jimin's mouth. Finally, he nodded slightly and signaled for Jimin to come in. As soon as Jimin stepped in, a large room opened up in front of him. Inside, there was a large table filled with documents and computer screens that displayed various information that Jimin could not understand. The room felt very gloomy, like a secret headquarters filled with dark secrets. "This is not a place for people like you," the man said, turning his gaze to a computer screen that was displaying blurry images. "But if you really want to know, you have to be prepared to face a reality that is much worse than you can imagine." Jimin looked at the man with determination. "I'm ready," he replied briefly. The man turned his body and opened a tightly closed desk drawer. Carefully, he pulled out a thick black envelope. "This is the evidence you're looking for," he said, throwing the envelope at Jimin. "But remember, once you know, there's no turning back." Jimin stood still, his eyes fixed on Jungkook's back that was getting further away. The pain came so suddenly, sharper than he had ever felt before. He wanted to run after his best friend, wanted to scream, but the voice was stuck in his throat. There was so much he wanted to say, but it didn't feel like enough. "Jungkook!" Jimin exclaimed, trying to call back, but the sound was just floating in the air, nothing more than the passing wind. Jungkook didn't look up. Jimin felt a deep fear. Maybe it's more than that. He feels like he's lost something so big, something more than friendship. Every second feels longer and longer, and the more he tries to stop himself, the deeper the feeling grows. Jimin's steps are heavy. He feels like there is an invisible burden that binds him, prevents him from moving forward to understand what is really happening. What happened to Jungkook? Why did the man change so quickly? What is he hiding? Jimin decides to follow Jungkook. He knew very well that the feelings he had now were not just about friendship. There was more to it, darker and more dangerous than he realized. Every second that passed, the feeling grew more haunting. He didn't know where Jungkook was going, just following his footsteps farther and farther. His heart was beating fast, trying to figure out how to understand what was happening. However, the more he tried to get closer, the more he felt blocked by a wall built by secrets and lies. Finally, after hours of walking without direction, Jimin arrived at a place unfamiliar to him. An old building that looks very shabby, like a building forgotten by time. He could feel the heavy atmosphere, like this place harbored many secrets that he did not want to know. Jimin held his breath and entered the building. His steps felt very quiet, as if he was entering a different world. As soon as he went deeper, a large room opened up in front of him. Inside the room, there was Jungkook, sitting alone on an old chair, staring blankly at the frosted window. "Jungkook," Jimin called in a low voice, trying not to startle him. Jungkook didn't move, didn't turn his head. The atmosphere between them was tense, like there was a great distance even though they were only a few steps apart. Jimin felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, afraid that if he went further, he would fall without being able to return. "What's wrong with you?" Jimin finally asked, his voice almost whispering. "Why did you change like this?" Jungkook remained silent. But Jimin could see, even though Jungkook's face was flat, his eyes were emitting something dark, something filled with pain and regret. "Jungkook, why didn't you say anything?" Jimin's voice began to sound more disjointed. "What happened? What are you hiding from me?" Jungkook let out a long sigh and finally turned his head. His eyes met Jimin's eyes. There, Jimin could see more than he expected: confusion, anxiety, even deep fear. But more than that, there was something darker, inexplicable in words. "I'm stuck, Jimin," Jungkook said, his voice heavy. I can't get out of here." Jimin felt his throat choked. "What do you mean trapped?" Jungkook lowered his head, unable to look Jimin in the eye. "I'm trapped in a world you can't understand. A world that, if you knew, would destroy everything." Jimin took a step back. A cold feeling crept all over his body. "What do you mean? What's going on, Jungkook?" Jungkook stood up and walked over. Every step felt like a rumble that made Jimin less and less know what to do. The tension increasingly choked the air around them. Jungkook paused for a moment, as if confused by his own words. I don't want to involve you. I don't want you to know about this. But you're already involved, Jimin. And that means we can no longer retreat. Jimin felt his body shiver. We can't retreat? What the hell is going on? He asked once more, this time in a louder voice, breaking the pressing silence. Jungkook finally lifted his face, his eyes looking filled with incredible tension. I'm involved in something bigger than you can imagine. Something that could destroy us both. If you knew, you'd lose everything, including me. Jimin wants to say something, wants to force Jungkook to talk more, to reveal all the secrets that now weigh him down. But as time went on, he felt a deeper change within him, an unspoken sense of love, which was now beginning to burst forth, demanding to be expressed. But at the same time, he knew that this was the wrong moment. The love that he had been hiding could no longer be guarded, but the darkest moment was the moment when it was impossible to express that feeling. I can't let you get stuck alone, Jungkook, Jimin said in a determined voice, though his heart felt broken. I will stay here, whatever happens. However, Jungkook just shook his head. No, Jimin. This time, you can't save me. I have to face this alone. Jimin stood in the doorway. His eyes couldn't stop looking at Jungkook's shadow that was getting further away. It felt like there was an empty space dividing the heart, much deeper than before. Jungkook's every step felt so painful, as if every second that passed stretched an unattainable chasm between the two of them. Outside, the twilight sky emitted a gloomy orange glow. Jimin's footsteps stopped when he heard the sound of a door slamming loudly from outside. Jungkook returned, and this time there was something different in the air, something that shook Jimin's body to the bone. What are you doing, Jungkook? Jimin asked, his voice trembling among the piling up tension. Jungkook stood in front of the door, his body looking stiff, like there was a weight he couldn't take off. His face looked more jaded than ever, like someone struggling to hold on, but almost losing hope. I told you, this is not your place, Jimin, Jungkook replied softly, his voice hoarse. You won't be able to understand. All this is too heavy. Jimin bit his lip, holding back the turbulent emotions inside the chest. Do you really believe that? That I won't understand? We've been through so much together, and you're just gonna let it go? You're really sure? Jungkook looked at her with eyes full of despair. I don't want to involve you. I don't want you to be trapped in the world I live in. But I'm already trapped, Jungkook, Jimin said, almost in an angry tone. I'm already here, by your side. Don't tell me I can't help it. I know there's something you're hiding, and I know it's dangerous. But I'm here because I care. I'm here because of what? Cut Jungkook sharp, step back a little. Because you love me? Jimin fell silent, surprised by the question. He never intended to express his feelings, at least not in this kind of situation. But the words had already come out of his mouth, and now he felt as if something had come to light, which could no longer be hidden. No. I just wanted to help, Jimin replied, trying to cover up his mistake. However, his heart spoke otherwise, and it was very clear in his gaze. Jungkook let out a long sigh, as if he was too tired to continue this conversation. I can't let you get involved, Jimin. There's nothing we can do anymore. Jimin felt that his body felt very tired, as if there was an unbearable weight inside his chest. Jungkook, I won't back down. You may think I can't understand, but I've felt it. I know there's danger out there, and I know you feel trapped. But we can get out of here, together. However, Jungkook's answer was just a blank stare. He didn't say anything else. Jimin could feel such a big difference between them, and that feeling couldn't be ignored anymore. Jimin, Jungkook's voice finally sounded quiet, full of despair. You don't know what I'm dealing with. I can't let you suffer because of me. Not anymore. Jimin felt the world around him as if collapsing. No more words could calm the depths of the abyss that opened between them. He could only stare at Jungkook, trying to find answers that couldn't be found. The next day, Jimin could not sleep. A feeling of wakefulness and anxiety overtakes him, like something bad is about to happen. Even though his body was exhausted, his mind kept spinning, looking for a way to restore order. Jimin decided to find out more. The decision came like an impulse he could no longer bear. He must know, no matter how dangerous it is. Jungkook's existence is now more than a feeling, more than a friendship. It's a mystery to be solved. He couldn't stay still and let Jungkook sink into the darkness himself. Not after everything they've been through together. The atmosphere that night felt increasingly tense, like there was a wind that carried an inaudible whisper. Jimin stood in the doorway, the envelope squeezed in his hand felt heavier. Every word in the letter hung over his mind, forcing himself to wonder about the truth hidden behind it. Outside, it rained heavily, grinding the city into uncomfortable silence. Jimin squeezed the envelope even stronger, trying to restrain an almost uncontrollable outburst of emotions. What does Jungkook mean by those words? What was he hiding from Jimin? Why was he so adamant about distancing himself? What should I do? Jimin muttered, his voice almost drowned in the roar of the rain outside. Every second that passes feels more and more isolating for her, creating an invisible wall that separates her from the person she cares about so much. His head was spinning, considering the possibilities. All of this feels so unfair. Does Jimin have to obey Jungkook's request to stay away? Or will he have to fight back, fight for their relationship, even though all of that could mean more dangers lurking? However, as Jimin stared at the crumbling envelope in his hand, something flashed through his mind. There was something bigger than he could imagine, something darker, a force that dominates Jungkook, which makes him do so. It was a bigger secret than just friendship. Jimin knew that if he didn't act now, it would be too late. Jimin knew that in order to find answers, he had to go further. There is no more room for doubt. He decides to track down the traces left by Jungkook, looking for information that could explain why his best friend acted that way. The decision was unanimous. He can't wait any longer. The next morning, with determination, Jimin came to the place he had expected. A forgotten old warehouse on the outskirts of town, the place that had been the source of the rumors he had heard about Jungkook. A place that is said to be a meeting center for those who are involved in something much bigger than it seems. Jungkook, what are you doing here? Jimin asked in a trembling voice, although he tried not to show his fear. Before he could go any deeper, someone's footsteps rang out behind him. Jimin turned his head, and before him stood a man dressed in a black suit, his face hidden in the dark shadows. Jimin, the man's voice sounded heavy, as if it contained an unspoken threat. I knew you were coming. Jimin was silent for a moment, feeling as if this whole world was spinning so fast. Who are you? What do you know about Jungkook? The man just smiled coldly, a smile that did not invite the slightest sense of trust. Jungkook is not someone you know. He's more involved than you can imagine. Jimin gasped, his heart beating faster. What do you mean? What is he hiding? The man did not answer immediately. He looked at Jimin with a sharp gaze that seemed to be able to see into his heart. You won't be able to protect him if you continue to follow this trail. There are bigger things than just friendship. Darker things. Jimin felt a tension that increasingly bound his body. There was something very wrong here, and Jungkook didn't give him any clues. All this is all the more confusing and terrible. Before Jimin could ask any further questions, the man stepped back, disappearing into the shadows of the silent warehouse. The remnants of rain outside only added to the increasingly tense atmosphere. Jimin returned to his apartment with a swirling thought. What exactly happened? What was darker than he imagined? The deeper he dug, the more fear lurked. However, when he opened the door to his apartment, he found a much bigger surprise. On the dining table, a small box lay. Without thinking, Jimin took the box and opened the lid. Inside was an old watch, already slightly faded in color, with an unknown engraving. He recognizes the symbol. An emblem that often appears in the mysterious stories circulating around Jungkook, the emblem of a secret group he had never even imagined before. Trembling, Jimin took the watch and felt that something was very wrong. Jungkook is really caught up in something much bigger than just a personal matter. This is where Jimin's journey begins. Now, he must uncover the whole truth, even if it could mean losing everything. Jimin felt as if the world came to a standstill when Jungkook's voice on the phone was cut off. His heart was beating fast, his body seemed to be trapped in a vacuum. What the hell is going on? Why is Jungkook asking her to stay away now, after all that has happened? With a turbulent feeling, Jimin looked at his now dark phone screen. The phone was disconnected without further explanation. There was only a stifling silence, like there was something very important going on, something Jimin couldn't understand. Without thinking, Jimin stood up and immediately put on his jacket. He knew one thing for sure. He couldn't leave Jungkook in danger, no matter what. Jimin got out of his apartment and headed to a place he already knew. The deserted old building, where he and Jungkook often train or just spend time together, is now a place of mystery and fear. It's ironic, Jimin thought, how a place that used to be full of laughter is now a location that holds dark secrets. When Jimin reached the front of the building, he felt tension in the air. The atmosphere was so quiet, as if every step he took could be heard echoing in all corners of the city. He stared at the building with ever-increasing anxiety, feeling like something was lurking from within. His heart was beating faster, but his pace was unsteady. He knew he had to go in, had to find answers to all the questions that were now running through his mind. At the door, Jim paused for a moment. Is this the right decision? But his little inner voice reassured him. He had no other choice. With a deep breath, Jimin pushed open the door and stepped in. Upon entering the building, Jimin felt the cold air enveloping his body. The atmosphere inside was adding to the tension, like there was something hidden in every corner. The floor creaked under his steps, and only the sound of his breathing was clearly audible among the darkness. Jungkook, call him, his voice echoing in that gloomy, empty space. No answer. Only silence added weight to his chest. His pace quickened, although fear began to creep over his body. He felt like he had eyes watching his every move. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from upstairs. Jimin paused, feeling the tension mounting. It was the sound of something falling or someone falling. Without thinking, Jimin ran towards the source of the sound, climbing the stairs with hasty steps. No matter where he went, the fear grew in his heart. What happened to Jungkook? Upon arriving upstairs, Jimin saw something unimaginable. In a dark room, Jungkook stood with his body bowed, his face invisible, but his body seemed stiff and staggered. Around him, there were a number of black-clothed men standing, looking at Jimin with cold gazes. Jungkook, Jimin shouted, his voice full of anxiety. What happened? Why are you here? Jungkook raised his face, but there was no expression. His eyes were blank, as if he didn't recognize Jimin, who was already standing in front of him. Jungkook. It's me, Jimin. Jimin tried to get closer, but some of the men stopped him immediately with a threatening look. One of the men stepped forward, his voice flat and menacing. You shouldn't have interfered. All this is already out of control. Jimin looked at her with confusion and fear. What do you mean? What happened to Jungkook? The man did not answer, but rather looked at her more intently. You don't know who really controls him. Jimin felt his body limp. There is something bigger than he thinks. Jungkook is not just a friend who seems lost. There is a network that controls everything, and Jimin begins to realize that he is trapped in it. Jimin looked at Jungkook once more, trying to find a glimmer of hope in his friend's eyes. But what he found was nothing but emptiness. Jungkook stood like a puppet, no longer like the person he knew. Jungkook, please. Don't let them control you, Jimin said in a trembling voice. However, Jungkook remained silent. No answer. No rejection. Jimin felt his heart break. He has tried everything, and now he feels like he has lost everything. However, just then, the sound of Jimin's cell phone went off loudly, distracting everyone. He looked at the screen and saw a name he didn't expect. Of course, it was a number he had been trying to avoid for a long time. With trembling hands, Jimin answered him. Jimin. The voice on the other end of the phone sounded full of regret. You have to leave now, or things will get worse. The sound made Jimin's heart beat faster. The sound wasn't just a warning, it was a threat.